A humanoid robot welcomed the leaders of Russia, China, and India at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit. Japan uses quantum entanglement to give robots more precise movements, making them somewhat more human-like. The Terra solar car, which claims up to 1,600 kilometers per charge, is now ready. Genetically modified silkworms make spider silk, which is used for bulletproof vests. RoboBall, the spherical robot that can explore lunar craters and extreme terrains here on Earth. These and other new technological innovations will be featured in this episode, and that's what we're going to see in today's video, right after the intro. Hello, Amazing Reality. I'm Amazing Reality, and you're watching Amazing Reality. If you like our channel, go ahead and leave your like. If you can, share it and leave a comment. It really helps with engagement. Without further ado, let's get to the video. When you see a humanoid robot moving, have you noticed how it often seems kind of stiff? Like it's over-calculating every step it's going to take? That doesn't happen by chance. It's not just an impression. That's what's happening. For every movement, the robot's computers need to solve a complex problem called inverse kinematics, which basically calculates how each joint should bend so that the hand or foot reaches the right spot, the desired point. The problem is that there are thousands of possible combinations, and traditional computers solve this through trial and error. The result, slow movements and often unnatural ones. Researchers from the Chiba Institute of Technology, Waseda University, and Fujitsu chose to analyze and address this problem in a rather unexpected way. Using quantum computing, they represented the robot's joints as qubits, taking advantage of quantum entanglement, that phenomenon where particles influence each other even when they're far apart. It's a perfect metaphor for the robot's body. Moving one joint always affects the others. The plan was to build a hybrid system. Direct position calculations used quantum circuits, while inverse kinematics stayed on classical computers. This division sped up calculations and cut errors by up to 43% in tests on the Fujitsu quantum simulator. In one of the experiments, they simulated a humanoid robot with 17 joints, something that would normally take half an hour of processing. They achieved viable results in much less time, even on a real 64-bit quantum computer developed with RIKEN. And why does that matter? Well, because the robots of the future, especially humanoids, which will work side by side with people, need to move smoothly, respond quickly, and handle complex environments in real time. Today, many projects simplify the robot's body to just 7 joints instead of 17, which makes these movements kind of stiff and artificial, as we can notice. The quantum approach promises to eliminate all that stiffness. The most exciting part is that this already works on current generation quantum computers, which aren't perfect but have solved specific problems. In other words, by combining robotics and quantum computing, the Japanese have taken a concrete step toward turning humanoids into much smarter and more realistic machines. The current automotive sector is a portrait of true inefficiency. Do you know why? Did you know only 25% of gasoline car energy powers movement, with the rest lost as heat and pollution? And when you finally reach high speed, another 60% of the energy is lost just to push the car through the air. Confronted with this, a Californian company wondered, what if we could cut aerodynamic drag to nearly zero? The answer came in the form of the Aptera, a 3-wheeled vehicle that completely reimagines what a car can be. It was designed from scratch, focusing on efficiency, low weight, and a structure made of carbon fiber and aluminum. Aerodynamics are so advanced that nearly all energy moves the vehicle. The result is impressive. Up to 1,600 kilometers of range on a single battery charge, which is much higher than regular electric vehicles. And here's the detail that changes everything. Since the efficiency is so high, it makes sense to integrate solar panels directly into the bodywork. In sunny regions, Aptera claims that you could practically drive using only solar energy. You'll never look for a shady spot to park your car again. And speaking of parking, imagine parking your car at work and coming home with more range than when you left. In some areas, this could mean over 10,000 kilometers of free driving annually. Of course, when needed. The car also works like a regular electric vehicle. Fast chargers add 0 to 100 kilometers in about an hour. Since it uses just a third of the energy of a traditional electric vehicle, its running cost is also reduced by a third. Safety was a priority. Aptera's body uses carbon compounds like those in Formula One, features metal reinforcements, impact zones, and a steel cage for occupant protection. Another interesting fact is the internal structure consists of just 6 main parts. This means less weight, more simplicity, and much cheaper mass production. The design is also impressive on the inside. There's plenty of space for the occupants. There's also a panoramic windshield that enhances the entire futuristic feel. And despite its very different appearance, driving an Aptera is described as smooth, quiet, and responsive, just like any good electric vehicle should be. The company's stated goal is simple: to create a world where future generations grow up without even knowing what it's like to refuel a car at a gas station. A vision for clean, accessible, solar-powered transport. And do you believe that a solar car like the Aptera can really compete with giants like Tesla and build your dreams? Or will it still take a long time before we see roads full of vehicles that charge themselves with sunlight? Let us know in the comments. So have you ever imagined a ball-shaped robot rolling down steep slopes on the moon, mapping craters where no other vehicle could go? That's the idea behind RoboBall, a concept that was born at National Aeronautics and Space Administration 20 years ago, and is now coming to life at Texas A&M University. The spherical shape may appear simple, but its lack of a defined front or back lets it move through areas where wheeled or legged robots would get stuck. The original idea came from engineer Robert Ambrose, who even built a prototype, but the project was shelved when the focus shifted to manned dirigible vehicles. At the university, Ambrose and 2 graduate students have revisited this concept. They're developing 2 versions: RoboBall 2, a smaller 60 tons model for testing power and control, and RoboBall 3, a much larger 1.8-meter model, built to transport sensors, cameras, and collection tools during missions. Initial field tests are happening on Texas beaches to prove the robot can achieve something unprecedented. Exiting the water onto sand without tipping or getting stuck is impossible for regular vehicles. If it works, it will be proof that RoboBall can handle environments ranging from Earth's seas to lunar craters. In one of those tests, the smaller version was impressive, reaching 32 kilometers per hour, and that's half of its theoretical limit. Naturally, this design has its own challenges. Since all the mechanical parts are sealed inside the shell, any failure requires taking apart and reassembling the entire robot. And since there isn't any similar project on the market, they're having to invent solutions from scratch for every obstacle they encounter. But the long-term vision is bold. Swarms of RoboBall being launched from lunar modules, rolling through craters to map the terrain, collect data, and even install equipment in places where humans could never safely reach. Mount Fuji, Japan's postcard and a symbol of tranquility, is also an active volcano that hasn't erupted since 1707. But this week, millions of Japanese people had a reality check. The Tokyo Metropolitan Government published artificial intelligence-generated videos depicting a modern-day violent Mount Fuji eruption. The footage is part of the Volcanic Disaster Preparedness Day and simulates a devastating scenario. Smoke from the gray summit reached central Tokyo, nearly 100 kilometers away, in hours, completely covering the capital. The video depicts halted transportation, food and energy shortages, and persistent respiratory issues, all caused by the ash fall. The goal is, of course, to prepare the 37 million residents of this metropolitan region for a disaster that could happen without warning. Authorities say there are no signs of an imminent eruption, but reactions are mixed. For residents like Yorio Aki, whose home overlooks Mount Fuji, the alert immediately prompted them to buy emergency supplies. Others, like Shinichiro Kaira, expressed discomfort. Why are we hearing about 10 centimeters of ash in Tokyo now? Is there a risk we don't know about? This contrast between awareness and fear shows how delicate risk communication is. Experts like Naoya Sakiya from the University of Tokyo point out that simulations like this are nothing new. Japan has been modeling scenarios for earthquakes and typhoons for several decades now. The use of artificial intelligence, however, brings a realism that affects the population much more deeply. The purpose is not to alarm, but to turn concerns into practical actions. Stock up on water, food, flashlights, no evacuation routes, and keep all family plans up to date. Remember, Mount Fuji has erupted about every 30 years on average. It's been 318 years since the last eruption that blanketed old Edo in ash. scientists still classify Fuji as active. Japan, with 111 volcanoes in the Pacific Ring of Fire, can't afford to ignore low probability risks. The videos ultimately raised a key question. How do you balance realism with reassurance? For some, it's uncomfortable. For others, it's a vital reminder that even the most majestic symbol can change lives in the blink of an eye. Spot, Boston Dynamics' robot dog, is nearly a celebrity. He carries loads in factories, inspects dangerous sites, and even dances on a television show. But now he has surprised the public again by performing backflips in a so-called conscious way. A feat that seems like pure entertainment, but actually hides a much more technical reason. Honestly, no one expects Spot to do flips in daily industrial work, right? But these extreme movements are the way engineers found to push this robot to its limit. Each jump strains its balance, pushes motors and power, and helps it learn to recover from falls. Akun Kumar, an engineer from the Spot behavior team, explained, "It's about testing critical conditions to ensure the robot's reliability in any scenario, not putting on a show. Reinforcement learning makes this training possible. It works in a similar way like training a dog. In simulation, Spot earns rewards for correct movements and gradually improves its posture and balance. When the behavior works well in the virtual environment, the team brings it to the real Spot and tests it in our world. If something fails, engineers analyze errors and adjust the model. It's a cycle of trial, failure, reward, and refinement. The logic is simple but powerful. By teaching Spot to do something as difficult as a backflip, the team ensures he'll be prepared for more common situations, like slipping while carrying a box or tripping over a corner. At those times, recovering quickly without harming himself or the cargo can be crucial. Spot has already appeared dancing on several stages, showing off his coordination during choreographed routines. But deep down, every stunt is a scientific test disguised as a show. Boston Dynamics believes that the more he is pushed to his limits, the more reliable he will be for our real world. At the 2025 Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit, one detail overshadowed the lengthy diplomatic talks between China, Russia, and India. Instead of a fiery speech or surprise political move, a humanoid receptionist robot named Xiao Hu was introduced as official event staff. Xiao He, powered by advanced artificial intelligence, spoke Chinese, English, and Russian, and it was designed to guide journalists, reporters, and guests. During the 2 days of the meeting in Tianjin, the robot introduced itself as a state-of-the-art humanoid artificial intelligence assistant, offering real-time information, multilingual support, and even emotional recognition to adjust its responses to each audience it encountered. Xiaohe displayed great professionalism in the interactions. When asked about the delicate relations between India and China, he replied that he did not give personal opinions about countries or policies. At other times, he was friendlier, sharing details about the summit schedule, cultural activities, and even serving ice cream to media center volunteers. Xiaohe's appearance wasn't an isolated event. China also unveiled Guanghua No. 1, the first humanoid robot with emotional artificial intelligence that can mimic human-like expressions. And all of this is connected to a much larger strategy. Last month, the country hosted the World Humanoid Robot Games, featuring competitors from 16 countries in running, soccer, boxing, and task contests. Including a robot receptionist at a high-level international event, China is clearly signaling that it sees robotics not only as part of its domestic economy, but also as a key element of its global image. It's more than just technology. It's diplomacy being enacted by machines, thus creating a narrative of power and innovation in front of world leaders. And that leaves us all with something to think about, doesn't it? Will we soon see humanoid robots increasingly taking on roles around politicians, as well as in companies and public spaces, to the point where they become a natural part of our society? Or is this still just a technological showcase with more strategic than practical objectives? Tell me your answer here in the comments section. And don't say that robots will be the politicians of the future, okay? Stronger than steel, more flexible than nylon, and as light as cotton, spider silk has always been considered one of the most incredible materials in nature, but also one of the most difficult to reproduce. That is on a large scale, of course. But now a biotechnology company from Michigan, Craig Biocraft, claims to have taken a definitive step in that direction. To turn the common silkworm into a living factory for spider silk, the big news came at the beginning of 2025. When Craig announced an insertion into the silkworm's DNA, they added the largest recorded spider silk gene. The gene came from the Darwin's bark spider, known for making one of the strongest natural fibers, which can stretch over a third of its length without breaking. The result is a hybrid cocoon made up of up to 90% spider silk protein, naturally spun by the insect itself. This leap solves a major scaling problem. Previous attempts to produce spider silk used bacteria, yeast, or even transgenic sheep, but they always ran into high costs and complex purification processes. The silkworm, on the other hand, is an animal that has been domesticated for centuries and already has a whole global production chain in place, which can greatly speed up the entry of this material into the market. Craig plans to produce up to 10 metric tons annually at a new Vietnam facility, enough to start industrial testing. There are many possible medical applications. Spider silk can be used for biodegradable structures, artificial ligaments, and even scaffolds for regeneration. Its strength can also lead to ultralight, bullet-resistant fabrics, complementing Kevlar. In fashion, it paves the way for high-performance clothing that combines luxury, durability, and biodegradability, a rare convergence of technology and sustainability. There are still obstacles. Maintaining fiber consistency across millions of cocoons is a logistical challenge, and turning this silk into final products without losing its unique properties can be complicated. In addition, manufacturers are still hesitant to adapt their entire factories for a material whose long-term supply chain is not yet fully established. That's why many experts think initial use will be in biomedical fields before expanding to mainstream clothing and fabrics. Yes, my friends, and these were the 7 technologies that show how the future is already happening before our eyes. From quantum computing, which smooths the movements of robots, to solar cars that hardly need to be plugged in. The question that remains is, which of these innovations do you think will happen first in real life? Of them? It still seems far off, too far to believe. Tell me here in the comments. Your opinion is important, okay? If you liked our content, you already know, right? All the information and the links to check are here in the description. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and leave a comment. Thank you for joining me once again. See you next time, okay? Bye. You made it this far? I'll find out. Give me a little summary. Of the 7 news stories you saw, the 7 technology news stories, you don't need to talk about them. Get them from the description and put them in the comments. You made it this far, that's good. Thanks, bye. Few will do that. If anyone comments, let's see.